I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and CEO of e-com agency Electric Marketing. Today, I'm talking with Lewis Schenk, an Australian-based entrepreneur and founder of 3 companies, including Boost Media Agency. He's been privileged enough to work with over 1,000 business owners and entrepreneurs, helping them grow their personal brand and strengthen their online presence. Lewis, thanks so much for coming on and joining us.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So before we jump into things, can you give everybody just a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. So long story short, I grew up in a small town. Well, it's the capital of Australia called Canberra. Fast forward to when I was 18 years old, I went over to the US to play golf in college. Things didn't really work out there. I wanted to turn pro after that, but it was really kind of a massive shift that happened for me in terms of like my personal development and mindset, which helped me actually get to the next level in golf. And then, yeah, things didn't work out there, but I built this itch inside of me that I just knew that I could never do normal things or like get a normal job. So that's kind of how I got started in business. I have like an events company. I'm partnered in multiple PR companies. And yeah, so basically grew my business from, scratch to over 1,000 clients in 2 years. And yeah, it's been a really, really exciting journey.
So when you mention these clients, what exactly are some like services that you're providing them?
Yeah, good question. So ultimately our mission as a company is to become synonymous with personal brands, right? Or personal branding. So using all the elements that make an elite personal brand. So, obviously having articles and publications like, Forbes, Entrepreneur, all these big places sort of talking about our clients. Then the next part is podcasts. So getting our clients in front of new audiences, helping them display authority and thought leadership. And then lastly is social media. So creating content, ensuring that they're getting in front of their audience consistently and in a way that, builds authority and also reaches the right people.
Awesome. And how much would you say like your own personal experience of building your own personal brand translates into the work that you're doing with your clients?
Yeah, good question. So I'm a big believer that, you got to practice what you preach. And I know for me, like I know other people who are, in different countries, different locations, the same industry, but ultimately, I really prioritize, not just like the way my brand looked, but the way my brand communicated, so that like I just inherently like knew that I had a stronger brand, which I just, whether it was true or not, I had the self-belief in myself that I was going to, outperform these other people just based off the way that I positioned myself in the marketplace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm fascinated with how quickly you were able to scale up on your clientele as well. What were some of the initial things that you did to get those first couple of people to make the leap to trust you to work with them, given that you didn't necessarily have like a portfolio of clients that you already were working with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So ultimately, it just came down to like starting to build my brand and just being like really aggressive, for lack of a better term, at just connecting with people, right? Like just trying to get as many people to know who I was, what I did, using every social media platform imaginable to actually start to build these connections. And then obviously, you can tell people about what you do. Then if it's something that they're interested in or a problem that you can solve for them, which it was for me, like I'll never forget the moment that I got my first client, which, like the universe does crazy things. Like, so my first ever client actually connected me like a year later with the guy that I've now been getting mentored by for the last 9 months. And it's been one of the best connections I've ever made. But yeah, so long story short, just like really putting myself out there and, not being afraid of failing and looking stupid, just really, taking the action.
Yeah, I mean, you really just have to take the leap at some point and go for it and see how things pan out. I think it takes a certain type of like personality and willingness to fail, or just have this concept that you're always constantly trying to improve as well. Because if you think that you're perfect, you're going to be given a reality check very quickly. So if you have that mindset of constantly improving, which is something that we like try to translate into like our business and growing it as well, I think you're better off in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, like that really came from playing golf. Like I always say this, but it's like everything that I learned playing golf at like, a college level and then at an elite amateur level, like that was an easy translation to business because you need the exact same like skills and character traits. Maybe not skills, but things like persistence, self-belief, just in trying to fall in love with the process and just get addicted to getting that a little bit better every day. And then, you look back 6 months, 12 months, and you can't actually comprehend how far you've come from those like daily micro efforts.
Yeah, I think sports have a great crossover into business and really just life in general, and especially when you're playing like high school or college sports and there's a routine and there's training and there's commitment and there's dedication and there's sacrifices from doing other things necessarily so that you can focus on that sport and easily translate it over to business. And I think you see a fair amount of like successful entrepreneurs have some sort of a background in that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny you say that. I was actually at like a business/personal development event on the weekend, and you get partnered up with different people. And I was chatting with this girl, and she was like in the Australian softball team, right? But she's like been struggling with certain things recently. But anyway, I told her, I was like, look, honestly, if you can get yourself to like an Australian level sporting team, like business is going to be so easy for you. Like I think business is like, you learn a skill, you practice it like a sport, but there's way less external influence, in my opinion, in business, right? Like sport, there's a million different things, you can get injured, like, and so yeah, point being that I think if you have the character traits of like an elite athlete, you can easily win in business.
Yeah, definitely. So before we dive into some of the aspects around like building a team and culture, for everybody that's listening, what are some like top 3 tips for them to go out and build their personal brand? Because our audience is a lot of like entrepreneurs and like e-commerce operators, and more personal branding is becoming critical to actually the success of businesses, even like direct to consumer businesses, because consumers latch on to personalities that are behind the brand. So what are some tips and tricks that listeners can take away from this?
Yeah, first and foremost is just literally being the face of your brand. Like I work with a few clients who still kind of operate behind the curtains of, their logo, if you will. And I'm a big proponent of people would much rather do business with a person than with a logo. So for people who just like run the business and don't, show their self, I think one, start doing that. Secondly, is just getting really clear on like the pillars of your brand, right? What do you like? What do you want to be known for? What value can you provide? And then creating all your content in alignment with that, right? Not mixing the message, not one day being e-commerce, the next day being, mindset coaching, you get the gist. And then I would say third is like your story and your messaging, right? So like getting really clear on your story and learning how to tell story in your content, because it's very easy to just like spit facts or say, this is this. But when you can actually tell a story, you build an emotional connection with the person where they feel like they know you. So you can really shortcut that relationship building through the right story and the right messaging.
Yeah, and that story and messaging is super important and something that we didn't even really hone in on until like year 2.5, because we were just going through so many iterations and growing as a company. And it took a bit for us to be able to, like, I think we had it internalized for a while, but being able to put it on paper and like present it to people in a way that resonated and was easily like digested is something that took a fair amount of time. But now that we have it, it's so much easier. Like our vision and our messaging is very clear, and it makes it so much easier when talking to prospects or clients or whomever it may be, for them to be able to understand what we're trying to accomplish here.
100%, man. 100%. They say facts tell, stories tell.
So on the building a team and culture side of things, what are some of the things that you look for? And also, at what point of your business did you realize like I need to go and get some support. I can't continue to just do it all myself. And when that happened, how did you go about doing it? What were some things that you looked for in building out that early team?
Yeah. So at the end of 2020, around November, December was when like I actually started work with my first ever mentor, and he gave me a few strategies to apply into my business, which when I did, it literally doubled it the next month, which when that happens and it's pretty much just you running the whole business, you find yourself very quickly working from, 5, 6 a.m. until 10 p.m., literally like almost unable to take a break. You have that much to do. And I remember talking to one of my buddies as well. And I was like, nah, man, like I love the hustle. I love like working all day. Like it's so good. But then you get to a point where it's like, man, I'm not really progressing. Like I'm just keeping up with the work that I'm doing, but the business is never going to grow from here. So for me, it's like, it was actually a really big step to give up control. I was like, God, like it's really scary to, give someone access to the email or give someone access to the social media and all these different things, purely because I'd never done it before. It was just this big, scary thing. But like hiring my first like team member, it literally took, 4 or 5 hours off my plate per day, which is huge. Right? And then I was like, well, there's like power to it here. So then just gradually hired more and more and more. But yeah, like in terms of what I look for, it's drastically different now than like when I first started. Like, to be honest, I've made that many mistakes when hiring, and it's not really been until recently that I've got like a process really dialed in terms of like hiring people. Before it's just like, cool, you want a job? Here you go, right? And obviously, it doesn't really pan out too well,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the things that I really look for is like the one question that I ask at the end of every interview is like, if we were to hire you and you're to become a part of the company, like how committed would you be to this role out of 10, right? And if they even like think about it for a second, say, oh, like it just gives me a vibe that they're not 100% committed, right? But the ones who say I'm a 10 out of 10, that for me is like cool. So I look at like, their demeanor, like, what sort of inspires them, what drives them. And then, yeah, like their level of commitment. Because at the end of the day, you can have the most talented, brightest person, but if they're lazy or not committed, then it's not going to do you any good.
Yeah, I think passion and the willingness to like learn and grow is extremely important. More important even than prior skill set, especially in like the marketing industry. All of these things can be taught. I mean, I wasn't even doing any of these things until like 3 years ago. So obviously they can be taught if we've gotten to this point. So the most important aspect is the willingness to like dive in and learn and not be afraid to make mistakes along the way. And so that's something that we try to find with team members. Like it's obviously great if you have experience, but it's also not the end of the world if you don't, and you're willing to sort of roll up your sleeves and learn and have that desire and willingness to do so. And something we did,
yeah, definitely.
Something we did early on was like tap into referrals from our team members. And we still try to do that as much as possible. But another thing was building out some questionnaires that are usually like 10 to 15 part questionnaires. And so if you apply to any of our positions and we think you're qualified and potentially would want to talk more, we will send you one of those questionnaires because only 20% of people are even going to reply to them. And so then right there, we just weeded out 80% of, and also saved us the time of even having a call with them or doing this or doing that. And so systemizing like the hiring process has really been a great unlock for us because we're spending way less time doing it, but being highly efficient with it versus before we were spending more time, but we're actually getting less qualified candidates and having more churn than where we're at right now.
That's awesome. So would you say that questionnaire was kind of like the one big sort of key that made that whole process easier for you?
Absolutely. Outside of the referrals, because like if you post a job on LinkedIn, we'd get 400 applicants. So how am I supposed to figure out who's good or who's not? So that questionnaire saved me so much time because in the early days, we were probably around like 10 people. I'd actually find the ones who I liked, reach out to them, schedule a call, and then basically do the questions on the call. But why not just screen originally? For one, if they don't answer, then you just screened out people who aren't motivated or don't care about this position, which there's a lot of that. You just do like a quick apply and you don't actually give a shit if you get the job or not. But if they do answer the questions, then you immediately know whether they know what they're talking about or not. And so you can skip that whole like baseline understanding of whatever the job is. And then when you actually get on the phone with them, it's more about the intangibles, the culture, the fit, and you don't have to spend as much time on that as either. And so we only do probably 3 calls now, maybe 3 to 5 calls for each new position, because we don't have to do any more, because we already do a lot of the vetting through those more automated and less time intensive processes.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
So if you ever have to post a job on LinkedIn, I would strongly recommend making that questionnaire.
Yeah, like that's actually one thing that I haven't done. I did implement a lot of things kind of similar, but I think, yeah, the questionnaire is, you really got my mind thinking now.
It's
I appreciate that.
quite the unlock. Is your team fully remote, or are you in person, or a combination?
So we have 3 team members at this location and the rest is remote. We've got team members in Europe, USA, one in Colombia. We've got a few virtual assistants in the Philippines as well. So yeah, pretty much all over.
Okay. And what have some of the challenges been dealing with that? Because I found obviously there's a huge difference between in-person and remote. There's definitely some benefits to remote. I don't know if any of those benefits are around having a better culture though, because you don't have that physical interaction with your team members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge would probably be, well, to be honest, like this whole company has been pretty much run remote from the get-go. So it's hard for me to kind of compare to like if we had been in an office versus remote. For me, like I really love the idea of remote. But at the same time, having like a small team in one location, like my ultimate vision isn't to have like an office of like 100 people. I don't see myself doing that. I want to run most of my companies remotely, but yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is just like, it was me in the early days, right? Like just lack of experience. Like we never had team meetings. It was just kind of like, go and figure it out. Something goes wrong, whatever. But we're able to like solve a lot of these things very simply, right? By having daily team meetings, accountability check-ins, sales meetings, etc. So yeah, probably just like the level of communication was too low to begin with in terms of actually being able to progress quicker.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, we've tried to do things around like virtual happy hours, or like we'll do like 2 truths and a lie with team members every Monday morning. Just some things to try and get people more connected. And then when we had our holiday party last year, that was actually the first time that probably even more than half of us ever even met for the first time in person. But just that one meeting, I think, was integral for setting us up for success for this year, because it's a lot different when you can put a face to a name in person, start to interact with people and build some camaraderie versus, especially when you have like very siloed departments where we'll do like design and development for websites, but and then we do email and SMS marketing. There's really no interaction between the two on a day-to-day basis. So it's nice to be able to see that you're part of a larger like group and that you're all driving towards the same goal, which is very difficult on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever. And I found on meetings, especially when it's a large group, even trying to get like team feedback or interaction is challenging. Like the all team meetings with 45 people on them, it's usually crickets. But when you can start to break down those barriers, whether it's through like fun activities or whatever it may be, that's when we've really been able to start to build some relationships.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And it is really hard over Zoom. Like I visualize it from like, wow, what would it actually be like meeting the team in person? Because nothing beats like human connection. Like, so I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. So building your team, you mentioned that you are basically all remote at this point. Where do you see your future growth coming from? Is it through client referrals? Is it through like direct outreach? How do you see Boost evolving over the next year to 2 years?
Yeah, good question. So I think the biggest thing will be paid traffic. So we have done 80% of our business through cold outbound, around 10% from referrals and then the other 10% from just a couple of random different things. So I really just haven't I had everything ready to go like a while ago. We had this campaign set up and then things happen, as you know, things change. And so like, I'm actually glad that it didn't go ahead then, but I'm actually working with one of my buddies who has a big digital marketing company here where pretty much got the landing pages built. We're about to go really hard on the pay because like I think outbound for like an agency type business, I think referrals, outbound, and paid are like the best ways to scale. We have a big client base, so we get like a ton of referrals. But yeah, ultimately, I think paid is going to be the next big key there.
Yeah, I think for us, client referrals have driven the bulk of our business, and they're also the longest lasting clients in terms of like retention and success, because they're usually just, I would say, higher quality, and those relationships have been much more successful than really any of the ones that we have gotten from cold outreach. I mean, cold outreach got us to where we are today. So obviously that's important, but we really haven't even done any cold outreach, I would say, in the past year, just because it hasn't been a source of, it hasn't really been a strong source of interest from us or revenue. So the fact that you're already able to tap into those client referrals is huge. Do you incentivize the client referrals at all, or does it just happen naturally?
It's funny you say that. So I've been building out like a more of an official like sort of referral program and almost like a white label partnership now as well, because we have a lot of clients who are in like they're a marketing agency and they have clients who are doing this and doing that, but they don't have any kind of media or PR or personal brand sort of presence. So they typically just refer us, but I'm in the process of like building out something very structured. It's just sometimes, it gets a bit confusing when you're trying to customize things for like all these different people. So I'm trying to make it as simple as possible so that, if we had 50 people get referred to us, like, next month, that we know exactly what we need to do. And the expectations are clear on both ends. So yeah, going to start to more heavily incentivize it now. We always like offer kickbacks and like, we'll just say, hey, we can, hook it up with, a free month of work and like all this stuff, but it's going to be more official moving forward.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us. But before we hop off, where can people find you online?
Yeah, probably best place, Instagram, at Lewis Schenk, all one word. Yeah, Brandon, thanks so much for having me, man. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. As always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electricmarketing.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.